everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and in today's episode of Dyepot PS, we are going to dip dye some yarn with a twist. Well, there's not going to be a literal twist, but we are going to be creating a gradient set by dip dyeing 100 grams of yarn at once. Now what we have here is not one skein of yarn. This is actually 5 50-gram mini skeins that I arranged in a sort of cute way. I sort of folded them into thirds and then looped them in each other. Now this little chain of these mini skeins that I showed here is very dense. I don't want it to be that dense when we do the dip dyeing because that would give a lot of resist points. Now don't get me wrong. Oh, and this one was just doubled, or 6 times around, I guess. Don't get me wrong. It would be really fun to dip dye something that dense and to see what kind of set we could create. However, I want to start a little broader and see what we can get when things aren't quite as compact. These are all 20-gram platinum sock fingering weight mini skeins from Wool to Dye For, and they are 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. To start, we are going to take one of the mini skeins and loop it in half. It's not folded in half like so, but looped so that way we have one complete intact circle. And then I'm going to do that a second time. So it's basically 4 circles in there. Then I'm going to take a second one and loop it in half so we have the circle. Insert one end into our first one and pull it through. And so you can see that this is still fairly dense, but still a lot looser than what we had before when we were looping things around a bit more. And so we are going to continue with our twice looped skein. Insert one end in and pull it up through. The reason on the one I showed at the beginning I had looped things around more was that I thought that the denser one looked sort of prettier for display purposes. But I think that I forget what brand does like a Pantone yarn that has a bunch of minis, and they do something like this but densely to display it on the shelves. Okay, and then finally here's the last one. It's the half length, and I am going to loop it in here, and then so it doesn't fall apart, I'm going to use one of my favorite reusable zip ties here at this end. And to compare this looped set of mini skeins to just a skein of 100 grams of Stroll fingering weight yarn from Knit Picks, you can get a sense of size. The length is very similar, so this should be a very comfortable length for me to dip dye into our pot. I have not yet decided if we are going to dip dye this braid into one color or 2. We're going to start with 1. I'm not going to pick a color that will necessarily break. I just sort of want to see the kind of effect that we can get. Clearly there's resist points. Everything's going to be kettle dyed. There's going to be variation throughout, but we should end up with a lot more pigment on one end than the other. I am going to pre-soak this braid in just some plain tap water for at least 30 minutes. And I'll come and make sure that there's no bubbles or anything. I want it to be nice and wet so that way it's really the resist from the yarn itself that's creating most of our variation in the pot. But we'll see. For the dye today, we're going to use some Jacquard Sun Yellow that I mixed up about 1.5 years ago. I call this color the bane of my existence because it crashes out of solution as it cools. That is cloudy, not because of growies or anything, just because the dye doesn't stay in solution when it's cold. But this color is stunning on yarn. In my warm dye pot, I have 16 cups of water, of nearly boiling water. But I'm actually going to reserve a little bit so that way I can rinse out the bottle of my dye stock once I've added color. Let's come and measure and see how much of this dye we have. So So that's 1/3 of a cup, which is about 79 milliliters. So it's almost 2/3 of a cup of what started out as a 1% stock solution. I am not entirely sure what it is now, but I am now going to go rinse out the bottle with the warm water that I pulled from the dye bath. Just so you can see, most of that color is in the pot itself. And then actually that cleared out the bottle really nicely. Now I also have a tiny bit, and by tiny bit I mean just the ends of a bottle of, I think it's Dharma Brilliant Yellow. There's probably not even 5 milliliters of it, but I'm going to take this opportunity to clear out this jar as well. And so you can see with a bunch of that warm water in here, it's just a hint more yellow. I'm going to estimate and say that we had at least 1.5 of those 1/3 cups, so we have at least 120 milliliters of our stock solution. If it was indeed around 1%, that's around 1.2 grams of dye that we put in this pot. However, your guess is as good as mine, and it was crash at a solution. So this is just a rough ballpark, which means that we were within the realm of getting a really nice yellow. We do need to add some vinegar, and I'm going to turn up the heat. I'm going to add 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of white vinegar in our 16 cups of water. I could have started a little higher. That wouldn't have been out of the range of normal for me, or even a tiny bit lower. A lot of times I like 1 tablespoon of vinegar in 8 cups of water, but I do want some of the color to start striking right away, and if we end up with some white at the other end, so be it. I am stirring this up, and as soon as that dye hit the hot water, it went into solution. It's really just a color that does not behave itself as a stock. So that is something that is always worth keeping in mind as you are deciding whether or not you want to create dye stocks. As our pot is heating up, I wanted to take this opportunity to give a shout out to all of the patrons, all the ChemKnits patrons for their support, including Ada Lai, Karen Siegel, and the rest of the Fiber patrons. And you'll see a bunch of their names going across the screen now. Patreon is a platform that connects fans with content creators that they really enjoy. And in exchange, I offer a lot of really, really cool perks. This includes early access to a video each month, and they can include behind the scenes sneak peeks, permanent Etsy coupons, and more. You can find all of the details on my Patreon page, and there'll be a link in the video description and the iCard. Patreon is just one other way to connect with me. Overall, thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting on these videos. The more you engage with the content, it just brings me so much joy. And I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. Let's go for it. And here we go. Ooh, first dip, most of that first skein. And I'm just slowly going in and then back out. So you'll hear me talk a lot about dipping and colors breaking, especially in the Summer Mini Skein mini series. But one thing that is for sure is that dip dyeing allows you to not only go in, but then come straight back out. So if you do have a color that breaks, you can get some of that color that is going to strike first all the way around. But there is a lot of color left, and each time I'm just going to go a little higher. So you can see we're getting sort of more of a pastel yellow in what's left. How similar or different those middle skeins are, it's hard to say right now. I have a feeling that we'll see different resist as, you know, this goes. I'm just sort of dipping in and out and moving it there, and you can see I'm going to put the whole thing in but still come back out. Oh dear. And that got a little disordered. I do want, there we go, some amount of yellow around the whole thing. Now, you might be wondering why I didn't do this with Wilton's Violet, which, as you know, is my absolute favorite. And honestly, I do everything with Wilton's Violet, and it's so hot and cheerful outside that I wanted to play around with some yellows. There's no question that we have a gradient going on here. And I think at this stage I'm going to go ahead and put everything in. And ooh, honestly, it's a little hard to see on camera, but in person I do see a more golden yellow going to a lighter yellow. Overall though, this whole effect is really, really subtle. We'll know more when we can open it up, and I think it's still going to be a really, really pretty set, but maybe I should have started with more acid. Probably should have just started with more acid. Where is our acid? Over here. I'm going to go ahead and add more now. If I had started with more acid, the colors would have struck faster. So let's go ahead and do one. Whoop, that's 2, 3 more tablespoons of white vinegar. Yeah, if I'd started with more acid, then the difference between the deepest shade and the palest shade, which you can tell on camera that they're different, that's just, there would be more extreme in there. So I'm going to go ahead behind the scenes and get set up to do a different color. I love what we've got going on here, but we've got more acid in the pot now. I think you guys all want something a little more extreme. It's been about 15 minutes. The color is incredible. Again, not quite what I was going for. There's no question that we have a gradient here. But rather than opening this up, I'm going to set it aside and we're going to add some other color to the pot. But yellow gradient that does not quite show up right on camera, but I promise is more goldenrod and then true yellow at the other ends. I promise I will revisit you more later. Probably I'll do a method of yarn dyeing with yellows just to show at some point, because I like yellow. I do. I just want to add a little more dimension to this color. I've got a tiny bit, maybe about a tablespoon of some cherry bomb that I mixed up about 2 months ago. And we're going to add this to the pot and then add some more color to just the end of our braid. This pot previously had currently started with 16 cups of water. It has 6 tablespoons of vinegar, a little bit of volume from the first, and I just filled up this bottle with the cherry bomb with some water. So that way I could try to leave no dye behind. And rinse out as much of this as I could. I've not squeezed out the water, and we're just going to go in. And we're going to add some orange to this. So I think you can see that the amount of red in here is pretty light. And I'm not going to go beyond, I don't think. I haven't entirely decided. But I don't think I'm going to go much beyond that middle skein. Maybe a hint of the one after it. You can see at this point that even though there's some color in the pot, okay, that's as far as I'm going to go on that one. But even though, and I'm going to dip this way now, get some color in those areas, but I'm trying not to touch the topmost one as best I can. I'm just sort of hanging out. And so now we're definitely going to have some variegated colors, and it's going to be all fine and dandy. I could have gone and dipped from the other end. I could have moved the ties but let's just see. Yeah. There's a hint of color left in the pot, but most of the color that we care about is in our yarn. So I'm going to go and set this aside now. And there. Now we definitely have something that feels, we can feel this gradient more. There's more red, less orange, a hint of orange, and then the yellow. We got something a bit more extreme by using that second color. There's not very much color left in our pot. And I did make a second chain. I want to give this a go. And this time we're going to make a color mixture. And we're going to go about this a little, I'm not sure. Going along with our theme. And I'll be rinsing out any bottles we empty into there, but that should be negligible additional dye. Let's see how much of the sage leaf we have. So 1. Okay, and then by the time we rinse the bottle out into it, I'd say we have about 2 tablespoons, so about 30 mils of sage leaf. Let's add in some, I believe that this is avocado. Let's do 1, 2, 3. The avocado is looking, I don't know if this one has a sediment to it. That looks really teal. I think it does shift as it dyes. Let me see. Nope, there's no sediment. I'm checking the bottom of the bottle and I'm not seeing any sediment down there. But let's start off and add this to the pot and then we'll see where we are color-wise. Okay, we still have a tiny bit of this orange hue in here. Then we're going to add our greens. And honestly, I could not tell you what color that is. Let's see if this will help. It's definitely green. Maybe with some, hopefully with some olive notes. That's sort of what I'm going for. Not much came out of mixing up the sage leaf bottle. I did use some water that was in the red bottle to help rinse it as well, but hopefully, oh, maybe this is a nice way to see the color. Yeah, we've got just like a really nice, fairly true green. We'll see how it reads on yarn. Because I'm feeling, oh, I don't know what I'm feeling, but let's go ahead and add a tablespoon of brown. This is just Jacquard brown. It was a 1% stock solution, and I mixed it a number of months ago. Okay, there we go. The green is feeling, it's got like a little bit of a brownish green. It's sort of what I wanted. I'm not sure if we'll see breaking. We do have a lot of different colors in here, so we are more likely than at other times. But I'm going to let this come up to temperature, and then we will dip. Now, if this mixture were food coloring, there's no question that we would see some breaking. Because this is the kind of thing we do all the time. But I think that we might still get something really, really pretty and fun, I hope. Oh, I should have, I guess we did have a fair amount of vinegar in here. Now the thing about, ooh, that color is pretty. The thing about avocado and what's the other, sage leaf, is that those colors are less pigmented than some other colors. So that's something to keep in mind. Ooh, but we're definitely getting like a full-on gradient. Going a little further. I'm not, again, not expecting to see breaking. Breaking is not our goal, but the goal is to get a beautiful kind of gradient. And I did quasi measure everything out, so we could go back and see like how much dye or approximately how much dye was in here. But I wish I could do a long shot here for you guys. But let's see how much color. Okay, the amount of color that's coming up now. Ooh, look at the runoff. That's very pale. Where is my spoon? There's still a fair amount of color there. But I do like what's happening. But you can tell sort of how more or less pigmented something is when we go down to this end part. And I'm going to put the last little bit in, which of course does mess up my handle on things, which is why I've got the tongs. That's why I've got the tongs, everybody. Okay, but there's definitely still color there, but the total amount of pigment at the lightest end is still really pastel compared to the deepest end. I could rig up a system so that way I wouldn't have to keep dipping and I could just sort of like hang here. Ugh, I would kill for a second camera and a wide shot right now. I mean, my kitchen's a mess, so I don't think you do actually want to see the wide shot, but it would be really cool to be able to show the position. But in general, the difference between, say, dipping like this, where you'll get a more gradual edge, versus dipping and sort of holding and then lowering and holding, etc., is that, oh, we're starting to clear. The main difference there is that you get something more gradual. If you were to just sort of like park and leave it, you might get some more defined lines. But I am expecting that we're going to get some cool, I'm hoping we're going to get some interesting resist stuff. So I think that at this point, if I were to go and leave the whole thing in there, I mean, I don't even know if you could see the other end. But yeah, a lot of this color is in the yarn, and this is pretty. Really, really pretty. Way more like saturated and muted. I'm now just thinking about what I want to do. Yeah, cause man, alright. I think I'm going to go ahead and leave everything in there. And I'm going to leave everything in the pot for about 15 minutes. I know it's a little hard for you guys to see behind the steam, but I do think that we got like a really nice gradient here. After 15 minutes, I'm going to turn off the heat and peek back. There's a tiny bit of color left in here, and I think I'm going to go ahead and leave the yarn in the pot to cool and see how much more of that last hint of color we can absorb. While I'm at it, I'm going to add a little splash of vinegar to help things as needed, but then we'll wait patiently for this to cool, and then we'll wash it. But I just have to take another look at our flame. This is gorgeous. I just took the green one out of the pot, and yeah, I am thrilled. And our dye pot cleared completely. Hooray! Let's wash the first one. That's making me think of a flame. As happy as I was with the very subtle yellow gradient, I think I would have left that if it were just a full skein of yarn. But given that these are minis and we do want to see some kind of change, I thought that adding the red would be a nice touch. And it's great. We've got this beautiful orange to bright yellow gradient, and I was able to keep some restraint with those reds, which I'm really proud of. But man, look at how yellow our nylon zip ties are. Alright, I am seeing a tiny bit of bleeding, which isn't surprising because there was still some yellow in the pot when I removed it. Sometimes that's an indication everything's going to be something that comes out. But the color looking great, and Yeah, and we're clearing. So I'm gonna rinse out. I'll probably do soap one more time. I'm just using dish soap. I'm gonna rinse that one more time, and then we will come and wash the green one, and I'll put everything through my spin dryer. Now for the green, which goes from sort of this olive, avocado color all the way to almost a forest green. Hard to say because the end color is so saturated if this is breaking or not. But whatever it is beautiful. And all of our color appears to be in the yarn. Of course, these gradients are beautiful, but we aren't going to forget the coolest part. And that's going to be when we open them up. I can't decide if I want to open them now or wait until they dry. I keep going back and forth. And by now, I mean, I'll put them through the spin dryer first, so at the very least, they won't be like super wet. They'll be mostly dry. But the reveal is one of the things I'm most excited about, because you can see hints, ooh. And what do we see down here? Yeah, there's going to be some. I decided to open all this up once it's dry. Even though the spin dryer has it mostly dry, the minis are easier to manage. And so I'll be back soon and we'll look at the yarn. Here are our 2 chain gradients, and I think they look awesome. The first one was the one we dip dyed in yellow, and then we added some red to give it a little bit more oomph. But look, see these like yellow peaks from the resist? Eek, I can't wait to open it. In the second one, we mixed a lot of greens and some brown together to make this really sort of saturated, muted tone. And again, there's some really cool resist marks. I'm really, really excited to open these up. Let's start with this one. And look at how bright that tie is. All right, so here is our first mini skein, which is almost completely just that bright yellow. There's a tiny bit of a hint of some of that golden color. And ooh, look at that. Okay, then we introduced, there's a little bit of white from some of the resist, but we're introducing some more orange. And here, the orange is intensifying, and I think our yellows will likely intensify as well. But the resist points were the same from the first dip and the second dip, so that's something to consider. But yeah, as we go on, the orange is getting more intense, but we still have some hints of yellow there. And I wonder, here's our last one. Yeah, I think this last one has a bit less yellow overall. I am really, really excited with how this turned out. I think that this would make a stunning fade set. And not just because of like the color coming through, but because of these pops of the other color. Sure, we could add these to the pot one at a time, set up some kind of gradient within our mason jars in the steamer basket. There's many things we could do if we wanted the colors to be more solid. But this is unique and fun. Now let's take a look at the green, which is a lot more muted, and we have a lot more variation within this first skein. There's almost some true olive green / brown colors in there. Now the one thing I didn't check the orange one for was, quote, balance. And that is, with these lighter patches, do they go all the way through? A lot of them do. There's some that don't quite, like right here. But you know, the balance will help say how repeating is the colorway. And the pooling and everything will depend on the number of stitches that you have. But there is, because of the way they were folded, some amount of regularity to where these resists are located, if that makes some sense. But as we go on, we still have those pale sections, but the greens are getting darker and darker and darker. And I think that that's just really, really fun. I twisted all of these minis back into skeins, and then I realized that I probably should have done the like twist, that denser chain thing that I started with at the beginning of the video. But I really don't want to untwist them. And I think that this is a way that people are a lot more used to looking at a fade. It could be beautiful, I think, to store minis in that kind of chain to get a sense of the gradient, but it also does hide some aspects of the yarn. And if I had listed them in the shop as they were dyed, people might think, oh, these are a bunch of semi-solids, when really they are a bit more variegated because of those resist points. And so I think that this way gives a little more of an accurate feel of what the colors could be like. That being said, whenever I list yarn in my shop, I try to also have a picture of it not twisted up. So that way people can see, okay, this is repeating or random. I think it makes it easier for someone to read the skein and get a sense of how the yarn might knit up. I am so thrilled with how this turned out, and I have a feeling I will be exploring this more in the future. I think that you could knit these going from one mini skein to the next, or you could sort of mix them a little bit by, alternating rounds, a couple of rounds in the middle to help the fade be a little more seamless. No matter what, I think you could create something absolutely stunning. Maybe not the two sets together, but each set of 5 separately is a wonderful complete set. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I'd like to give another huge thank you to all of the fiber patrons. Thank you so much for supporting ChemKnits through Patreon and helping me make videos like this outside of my normal schedule. Again, if you want to learn more about the Patreon, you can find links in the video description. And yeah, there's links to a lot of stuff in the video description if you want to learn more about any of the materials or tools that I used in this and other videos. Above all else, the biggest way that you guys all support the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel, and me really, is by engaging with these videos. Subscribing, turning on notifications, liking videos, leaving comments, watching and sharing them. This is the biggest way that you impact me and you support me, and I want to thank you guys all from the bottom of my heart for watching and enjoying the content that I create. Sometimes when I try something new, it works perfectly on the first time. Other times, like with the yellow, my vision in my head was different than what I saw in the pot. Now, if I had started with the green mix, I would have been happy. I had the dark to light, and it worked sort of like it did in my head. The yellow absorbed a little bit slower, and so I didn't see as extreme of a gradient as I wanted. And I think that this video is a great example of how sometimes if things don't come out the way they are in your head, it's okay to shift gears a bit and modify the colorway and over-dye it to turn it into something that is closer to what you want, even if it's different from your original vision. Over-dyeing is a wonderful, wonderful option, and it isn't a failure. It's just another way of adding color, and creating something really, really beautiful. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Usually I do these like fiber patron shout outs from behind the camera, but I wanted to come in front of the camera today to show you how excited I am for this technique. I'm not sure if the yellow is gonna do what I think I want it to do. I'm really, really hoping for sort of a gold to a bright yellow to a pastel yellow, but we're gonna have to wait and see. And so just know that when I am behind the scenes, I'm going, ooh, ooh, ooh. All right, I think we're about hot. All right, I still have to go wait a few more minutes before the pot's hot enough, but until then,